Hello and welcome back to Willowcreek Zoo. My name is the Lake Pond, and I just wanted to do a friendly reminder that if you liked the video, please consider giving it a like, giving it a little ring on the bell if you subscribe, and also I do have a Twitch that I stream to. We do all different types of builds on Planet Zoo and play other games, but Planet Zoo is going to be my main focus, especially when the second game is just on the horizon, so I'm very excited for it, and we're going to do a load of content over there, so if you want to consider just dropping a follow on Twitch as well, that would be great. Thank you. Today we're focusing on a build for the greater flamingos. This was suggested to me by my friend Wiggles. She's been a very good supporter of mine, and I would like to honour her with this build today. First of all, I'm going to focus on this little staff area, which will double up as a little shelter for the flamingos, as well as a sort of viewing point for the guests to have a look into the flamingos' sort of sleeping area. I had a few good ideas for this, but since the franchise is still quite relatively new, I didn't want to go too hard still, exactly the same with the sloth enclosure. I want to get a little bit of funding behind myself before I do any more like bigger upgrades to it, but this is small humble beginnings, I would say so. As with the first video, I will be speeding up points of this build, and as well as keeping all the sort of mistakes that I make in the build within the video, just to show you realistically how human I can be when it comes to building. I personally like that kind of environment, knowing that, you know, I learn from my mistakes, and it's good to show other people mistakes as well, how to avoid them. And I think I generally learn better doing it that way myself, but yeah. We've started with working on the staff area, as I said before. I wanted to include a little like nesting area for the flamingos, and I thought the kind of like moon shape or somewhat circle was an amazing like idea, like to try and keep the hay or the straw, whatever you want to call it, within like the nesting area. Although obviously it doesn't spill out in the game, but like I just wanted to give it a little bit of personality, a little bit of like guidance and whatnot, and I thought it looked really well, in my opinion anyway. I do go back and forth with ideas, and trying to deal with the terraforming in this game is sometimes a nightmare, but I really think that this works really well. I've never seen the flamingos actually use it, but in my head canon, they definitely sit down and perch at night when it's gotten all quiet in the zoo and no one's in there. So yeah, I like the idea of it. Okay, so it seems like I don't learn my lesson from previous building, especially from episode 1, where I didn't realise that, again, I was flat to the floor, and I think it's something to do with the pathing that I've got, the white brick pathing. So I will try to remember that for the next build. But yeah, I got to lift everything up and raise it above once again. But mistakes are mistakes, they happen. Now the window looks nice and flush, and I think the guests will be nice to be able to just have a peek in, see the flamingos on the inside if they really want to do so, if they end up on that side of the pathway. So I think that is relatively nice. It's a good gateway into just a bit of their private life, but also, you know, keeping them safe. There is a point later on where the flamingos actually escape through that window, which I swear I put a window into it, but I might not have. But yeah. Here I'm starting to rim out the top of the enclosure, just because I think a little bit of a difference in colour goes a long way when it comes to these really basic starter builds. And to be honest with you, I'm saving a little bit of money. I could go really hard with all the decoration, but I didn't want to chance the possibility of the franchise having some major issues. I just wanted to make sure that we are keeping within budget, within, you know, our finances. We don't have to take any loans out, because who wants to take a loan out in Planet Zoo? They're a nightmare, and last time I streamed and took out a loan, it took us roughly about 2 hours to get out of extreme debt because of it. So yeah, I kind of learnt my lesson, and I don't want to touch that at any point, not during this franchise anyway. That way, you know, we can keep it kind of pristine to what I want and have envisioned. But I'm gonna really struggle with this barrier sort of bit, but It does look better later on. I just wanted to make sure that the door's flush to the wall, but it kind of really annoys me that the door parts, the part with the door in it, doesn't actually align very well to the barrier doors. And it kind of just, it annoys me that it doesn't sit flush, and my brain just wants it to sit nicely in there without me having to do some extra construction around it. But we can't have everything. And yeah, in the end, like as I said, it's starting off, and it'll look better later on. We'll make an actual doorway and stuff like that later on. But yeah, we're gonna use the art of null barriers here as well. Null barriers are great for saving money because they don't cost you a thing. As long as you are happy with making your own sort of fences from from the foliage or from, the little bits of constructions, fences, stuff like that you can make yourself. So I'm trying to get the right words and they're not flowing to me as normal, but I think you guys understand what I'm trying to get by here. So yeah. So as I said before, I'm making the fencing that goes around the null barriers at its current point, and luckily flamingos do not overstep them. They're actually quite happy with just the very short sort of walls that we have there. And I think it works just right now anyway, until we can get a little, as I said, more custom building later on. But for now, just the basics is just nice enough. But we go with a dark drywall, I believe it's called, drywall. And then we put a bit of dark wood on top of that, which makes it look nicer in my opinion. It's a little bit custom, but it's not exactly the worst thing out there. And it's not bad. I like it personally. I really like the dark dry stone. I think it's just called dry stone, but I keep calling it dark, but that's because I identify it as the dark stone and the light stone, which is actually the dry stone wall and also the breeze blocks. So yeah, I just get a little bit confused sometimes, so if I do mention it that way, I do apologise. It is of those item blocks, but yeah, I make mistakes and I'm relatively new to this, so take it with a pinch of salt. I'm trying my best and I'm getting more confident with it, especially with making videos. I'm learning some new things and I'm really excited on this journey. I'm just very nervous at the same time, so yeah, it'll be alright. It always is in the end. So one of the things I don't like about the dry stone wall is sometimes when you connect a corner, they will just make this sort of like lighter stone, like 2 or so bricks that are like adjoining from, you can see it there in the corner, and sometimes it doesn't, and it really annoys me that sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't, but I've learnt just to ignore it for now. That's just a me thing at the moment, and to be honest with you, I feel that you're not looking so closely to these barriers and whatnot. But yeah, as I said, we now align this with a darker wood, which I think it makes the fence really pop. Now, bearing in mind, I have come to a realization on a different franchise that these fences, the natural wall size, is actually just a little bit too tall for children to see over, which is a bit of a nightmare because obviously you want children to see it, but technically speaking here, the game doesn't punish you for doing that. They can still visibly see the actual, animals for some reason, so if it's not broken, don't fix it, but I do like a little bit of realism in it in some places. But to be able to keep the flamingos in, I obviously want to keep them structurally inside I call it an island. I believe it is just an island, but the habitat, the exhibit and whatnot. And I think in the end, like, as long as it looks appealing to me, that's what really matters. And if it looks appealing to you guys, that's a bonus. But yeah, I think just experimenting with, especially at a beginner level, because I wouldn't say that I'm any expert when it comes to building. I know my thing or two, and I've definitely been a very big fan of certain people who play Planet Zoo here on YouTube and on Twitch and whatnot, and I've picked up a few things over the years, and I would love to be a person of that interest to another person. If I can teach someone else what I know, then that helps another person grow, and they can make some amazing things out there. And we do speak about this again. I know I keep plugging my Twitch, but we do speak a lot on the Twitch about building techniques and how to get something correct, or how does this work, or is my franchise gonna fail right off the bat, or we've even had like deers escaping for very silly reasons, and the things being on top of like buildings when they shouldn't have been. It's all a bit of a laugh, and I think this is, it's a simulation game, of course, but it's also it holds a place in my heart that is just janky mess that I love at the same time. And I think it's good to just enjoy the little things. But I tell you what I don't enjoy is the pathing. But I have recently started playing Planet Coaster 2, just in preparation of possibly Planet Zoo 2, and just to see how obviously Frontier has been fiddling with the games and whatnot, and the pathing system seems a lot more manageable and very user-friendly to begin with, like right off the bat. So I'm very excited for if they implement that into the new Zoo game. I think it would bring in a lot less issues with a lot of new players. I know it's a massive learning curve, and I still don't even have it mastered. I've been playing this for like, I don't want to say on and off, like 2 or 3 years. But yeah, actually back onto the building, and I'll stop being a nightmare here, but we're starting to lay out the water area for the actual flamingos, so they actually have their island that they can, have a little bit of a swim in. They do require water, so I think it's nice just to separate them from the guests this way by using the water element. It gives us a way to be able to, like, they're not going to be too close to the fences and whatnot. But yeah, no, I'm pretty sure one does actually get up right to the fence and peeks over at people, but they don't escape, aside from the window incident. But yeah, no, I think I like the idea of this little island, and I think it's good. The issue is that I find is just trying to get enough in the enclosure for the actual flamingos, because flamingos are kind of, I want to say fussy, but I don't think they really are. They're not the worst out there, but like, they're fussy about how much vegetation and foliage they have in the foliage? English is hard. But how many plants are in the actual habitat? Because naturally, I want to just blanket this whole island. I want to create something amazing, and then the flamingos are just there like, but that's too many, and it really annoys me sometimes. And I know on sandbox mode you can turn it off, but sadly not on franchise. But in the end, I know a lot of people play this for franchise, so if you want to use that setting, I would really recommend it, just so you can really get a bit more creative than what the game is allowing you to do so in franchise. But because we're on franchise, we are stuck with what we got. So what I thought, like, if I'm limited on the plants that I have, what would actually suit a flamingo enclosure? Now, obviously, I had to figure out, obviously, where they're from, what kind of plants they like and stuff like that, and I was very lucky that I can actually put cherry blossoms in there. So I decided that in the middle of the actual, like, habitat here, as I start kind of, like, doing a bit of terraforming, I wanted a central cherry blossom tree. Now, it really annoys me that you don't get cherry blossom like petals to put on the floor or whatever. I know you can use these as special effects, but again, baby franchise, we need to make sure we're saving money where we can. But yeah, I wanted to make it kind of central. It kind of reminds me of the tree from Bug's Life sometimes. But I just wanted, some roots growing out of it, some rocks that it's basically malformed into over time. This tree's been here for a long time, and the zoo's decided to build around it is the idea. But getting to the point where, it looks nice. I don't know if my terraforming with rocks is there yet. I am very temperamental with it sometimes, but the idea is I wanted to blanket this in foliage and trees and grass and flowers and rocks, and the flamingos are just like, nah, mate, that's too much. So I had to really like dial back what I've got, and it does feel like a bigger empty place. But I feel like as the flamingos breed and they get like more populated in the actual environment, I feel like it's going to be a lot more busier, and I think that will fill up the I want to call it the white space of the habitat. Plus, to be honest with you, you want the flamingos to be able to walk around and whatnot. They've got very thin legs, you know. The worst thing you've got is like you get a vet call that one of your flamingos has fallen over and it's broken its leg. Can't repair that thing. God Christ. But yeah, essentially, I just wanted to have a central focal point for this actual build, which is not the water, it's the island. And yeah, my inspirations are there, but I think sometimes I just can't fully grasp what I want to actually put down versus what I think I'm putting down. And I think it looks nice. You know, my Lord and Saviour in all these builds is random rotation on, because then I'm not repeatedly putting things down. But as you see from here, all I'm doing is like I'm dotting things around, and I'm not even paying attention to how much foliage I have in the actual foliage, you know what I mean. But how many plants I have in the actual habitat. Because not only do I want to decorate this, I want the water to be lifeful. Lifeful? Full of life. So I wanted stuff like lily pads, reeds, rocks, stones. I call it carpet, plant carpet in the bottom of the pond, because of like you get algae and stuff like that. I really wanted to replicate that. And it's really hard to do so when you are tight on a budget, as well as tight on how much you can actually put in their environment. And it is a big shame, but in the end, we make do what we got, I think. So here I've gone back to the usual standard of I need to get rid of the water to actually do the painting so I can see what I'm doing and just make sure that they're actually happy with the painting of the terrain and whatnot, because yeah, they could be very fussy. Like for some reason flamingos like rocks, even though, you know, well, I wouldn't say that rocks is actually quite difficult for a flamingo to be in this environment. I think grass is more of a concern, but I'm no zoologist, and you know, I've learned a lot of my animal facts from this game itself. So, in the end, you know, if they want rocks, they want rocks. If they want grass, they want grass, and whatnot. But yeah, I ended up getting rid of that water pump because I realized, like, if they've got a massive amount of water, what's the point in me having like an extra thing that I'm paying for to keep them from, you know, thirst issues. But yeah, this is where I'm kind of planning out what I want to do with the blanketing on the bottom. So I really like these kind of like yellow flowers that I think it really makes the pond life really expand, and it's full of life, full of its own ecosystem. Issue is, as I'm saying this, I'm watching that little bar go up bit by bit for every time I play something, and it's just a little bit of a nightmare. But I just wanted to make sure that, you know, there's something at least covering the floor, because no one likes like a empty floor. There's a little trick that I do here that I learned a little bit from being an artist myself, but there is in like pond life, at least in the UK, I've noticed if there's like weeds and algae and stuff like that in the bottom, there's most likely it growing from the right at the bottom to the top, as well as on obviously the banks and whatnot. But I like to add in the reeds at the bottom, so they're kind of like in a layer system in a way. So that way there's some poking up through the water, there's some that's in the water, there's some that's on top of the lily pads, so technically speaking here they'll be growing through the lily pads. And I think that gives a lot more character to the water as well, instead of it just being a blank hole with some mud in it and some water. But yeah, here I'm kind of like fiddling with the idea that this is a lot of white space, as I said, for the environment that they're in. It would be nice for them to be able to climb some rocks and sunbathe on the rocks and whatnot. But I think in the end, I did just get rid of it. I thought it looked a little bit naff, because realistically, I would want to put more plant life around that and just make it pop just a little bit more. But as you can see on the top there, like, I'm a little bit concerned about what I have available left for me. But yeah. As we're coming up to the final leg of this build, I did want to just say, like, I did speak a lot more in this episode than I did in the last one, and I'm not entirely sure what direction I want to go with yet in terms of these videos, so they may change. As I said, I'm learning more video editing skills as well, and I'm just playing around with ideas and suggestions. So if you have any ideas and suggestions, please leave a comment, and that way I can have a look. Oh, there we go, they've escaped. Oops. Anyway, they really do help, the comments at least, and it gives me a direction of what I think I should be doing in these videos, and if I'm talking too much or if I'm not talking enough, if I'm not talking enough about the actual build itself. I think at this current point I've enjoyed this video a little bit more than episode 1, just because I feel more myself and less nervous about it, because when you start a new project you always get a little bit nervous about things. But yeah, I've ended up obviously putting one of those windows in now that I definitely know it's there, because I can see the barriers, and we're calling the vets to make sure that the flamingos actually get thrown back in. But yeah, to start off with, we've only got a few flamingos, but yeah, this is me trying to get some more cool shots for the video itself, but I'm gonna royally fail most likely. But yeah, that basically marks the end of this build, and I hope you guys really enjoyed this one. Again, as I said, leave a comment. If you have a suggestion for a habitat you want me to try and do, please leave that comment, and we can see where it goes. If not, I'm always, I'm live, I say always, I'm live on Twitch quite often, and we do often play Planet Zoo, as I said before, and I will shut up about this in the future, but I just want to make it more aware. If you have suggestions and you just pop into the chat, then I will most likely be able to reply to them ASAP as well. So if you want a habitat dedicated to you or to your favourite animal, then just say the word and we'll try and get it done. But yeah, we're not sure what the next animals are going to be, but we'll see you next time.